Welcome back to Evergreen Spotlight. I'm your host, Julie Holiday, and I hope you had a wonderful holiday season filled with joy and relaxation. And as we step into the new year, it's a perfect time to reflect on the past and to also look forward to those opportunities that lie ahead. Today, we're kicking off the new year with a special countdown episode. And in this episode, we'll be sharing a collection of the best tips and insights from our incredible guests on Evergreen Spotlight. These valuable takeaways will not only inspire you, but also they'll equip you with the knowledge to tackle your own projects in the coming year. So grab your party hats and get ready to celebrate, and we can shine a light on those fantastic insights that can help guide us all in 2025. Kicking off our countdown at number 10, we remember this captivating episode featuring Paula Schleis from the Ohio Mysteries podcast. She and her co-host, Stephen Yoder, have been delighting listeners for 4 years. And in this clip, she shares a valuable tip about not getting caught up in the fear of making mistakes. And instead, she reassures us that the audience will understand. Let's listen to her insights.
Steve and I, after 4 years, we're still amateurs. Our audio, is often quirky, and we do a good job of getting rid of the ums. But every time I listen to an episode, I'm like, oh, I could have just said that differently.
Guilty.
So I think my best advice for podcasters is fans are actually really forgiving. So just have confidence. Don't sweat the little stuff. If you're giving them good content, they're going to overlook a lot of the quirky stuff. You're not a professional. They're not expecting you to be a professional. And if they are, just remind them from time to time, I just do this on my own time, a gift to you, be easy on us. But yeah, I think it's taken us 4 years, but we've gotten a lot of confidence. And I think that comes through in our podcast, and we're not so hard on ourselves.
I love that. And also too, it's kind of charming when there's mistakes made, I think. And I think that that's what the platform really sort of is forgiving.
When you hear those little flaws, it's a reminder there's a real person on the other end of that audio. And who doesn't want to have those conversations with friends?
Yeah.
And if you see me as your friend, and I want to be your friend, we encourage people to write us all the time, and there are people on social media that talk to us all the time. I feel like I've got some friends out there I've never met. And I'm sure when they hear those flaws, they feel that, oh, this is my friend telling me a story.
Wasn't that awesome? Coming in at number 9, we look back on an episode with the delightful hosts of DeMakes a podcast. And in this clip, Chris emphasizes the significance of forward thinking in the world of podcasting. As a seasoned podcaster, he shares valuable insights on how planning ahead can enhance the quality and success of your show. Here's a snippet of what he shared.
I also think, as far as thinking ahead, one thing I love that we try to do, and I think it's a smart thing to do for anyone that has a podcast, is so when it's Halloween, when it's Christmas, things like this, we try to have artists on to talk about songs. Like every year we secured like a Christmas episode or two. One October, we did all songs that fit into the theme of Halloween, something at least a little bit spooky or a little bit like, a little bit avant-garde or something that fit that theme. Same thing goes with anniversaries of artists that have passed away, or anything, whatever your podcast happens to be about. If there's a way to incorporate anniversaries, things that people might be looking for that week. If it's the anniversary of Kurt Cobain's death and you're doing a music podcast, and you might want to do an episode about Nirvana that week. I mean, that's just an example, but I mean, that applies to anything. I think Chris and I try to always be thinking about that months ahead of time as well.
Such a good piece of advice for our listeners. Coming in at number 8, we look back on the heartwarming episode with Kanika Chaddagupta from That's Total Mom Sense. In this episode, Kanika talks about having a unique X factor that makes the audience want to continue to tune into your podcast. Let's take a moment to listen to a clip of the insights that she shares with us.
Yes. I have to say, like, every one of us has a story. Your experience is so unique, but you do have to hone the craft and be able to tell it in a compelling way. I think that's really, really important because, it's just, I think it's mushroomed. And there's every second person. I joke because I have a mom show, but I'm like, everyone and their mother has a podcast. And I think
that's amazing.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah. I think the idea is to make sure you have like a compelling hook, because sure, you can launch a show, but do you want to keep the show? You don't want to pod fade. It's the retention. Why do people keep coming back? And, don't think that it's like the bright, shiny objects, like the guests that keep it going. It's you, is your unique X factor. Because when guests are promoting a movie or, their New York Times like best-selling book, they're doing a road show of podcasts. Why does the listener make sure to subscribe to yours and tune in and have your voice in their earbuds every week? So you got to give them something. So I would say, make sure you have a really, like a unique, compelling, authentic topic and, concept in mind when you're about to launch your show. And get prepared. Have your wish list like day one. Who do you feel like this person embodies what the show is all about? And get it on that spreadsheet. I mean, I've had that since day one. It hasn't happened yet, but it's getting closer. But, it was like cell 1, Michelle Obama. So it'll happen. But
it's definitely, you're very close.
Yes. Yeah. And I just was like, I need to know who really encompasses what the show's about. So do that. Be consistent. It is a long game. You're not going to, become famous and have this top of the charts show overnight. And so you have to make sure that you commit, and it's like every week without fail. There's no holidays. There's no sick days. Somehow I'm used to this because of parenthood. You got to show up. Yeah. You got to show up. You got to release that episode. And so have that pipeline in place. I know when I first started, I had like a bank of 4 episodes recorded before. So that way it's like, I'm good for a month. If someone gets sick, if I have to travel, I have it ready. And then never look back, just full speed ahead after that.
Love that. Be sure to check out Kanika's podcast, That's Total Mom Sense. Rolling into number 7, let's take a look back at the nostalgic episode with Hannah and Audrey from Sleepover Cinema. In this episode, the Sleepover sisters encourage podcasters to avoid looking for immediate success, but instead focus on being consistent. Let's check it out.
It's tough because it's really saturated. Even when we started, it was saturated. It's not like we started in 2006 or something. But I feel like you kind of have to not care about numbers, especially in the beginning. Obviously, if you're somebody who has a built-in audience yourself, then that's great, and it's going to be easier for you to just get a good base going. Like I edit some other podcasts for a different network, and like have kind of seen that on the back end. Like if a huge TikToker starts a podcast, it's like, all right, this is going to be kind of easy for them to build like a listener base of like, I don't know, they'll start off with like 500 downloads a week, which is like pretty solid as a beginning point. But if you have like no personal audience coming with you, then you just kind of have to not care about being immediately successful and just like be consistent instead. And then just like care about engaging with the people who listen. And I feel like that's kind of all you can do. But like caring, I feel like just caring is like the most important thing.
I was going to say that too. Like, would you still want to talk about this if no one was listening and you were alone and it wasn't a thing? You know what I mean? It's like maintaining passion for it and like wanting to have these conversations is is really important, and just being consistent. I mean, I'm really lucky in that like Evergreen and I have had this ongoing relationship for so long that like there's some structure through that. But then also like Audrey is, as she said, very like intense about work, which to me is a good thing. Like she balances me out really well, because when she said that she's a control freak, I'm like the opposite. I'm like, just take
Right,
it.
so
Like,
maybe it's a good balance, right?
Yeah. So I think finding someone who is equally committed but will fill in the gaps where you have them is obviously, that's like a very lofty goal. Like that can't happen for everyone, but if it could, it'd be worth prioritizing.
Nothing like family. These sisters know what it takes. Number 6 on our countdown has us asking, can I offer you some feedback? In this episode, Sara encourages podcasters to keep it real, and she highlights the importance of crafting an authentic vibe in your podcast, and she suggests that sharing these genuine moments that truly capture the experience of your guests is the way to go. Get ready to bring some heart to your show.
One of our, I'd say, first 5 episodes where one of our participants, the interviewee, he swore, right? Cuss word came out right and loud. And we actually had, one of the reasons it was a favorite is I had to have a conversation with the production team. Are we going to allow an expletive, right? And part of our conversation is this is not a podcast for my children, although my children do listen, but it's not a podcast for them. This is for professionals. And the feedback, he was talking about a feedback moment where he just kind of needed to let it out, needed to tell that person like what's going on. Fill in the expletive you think he was actually saying. And we talked about it as far as, I really love that we got to have a dialogue about the dialogue. And that was a really fun episode. I think he had a great time as we were talking about it, but I think it shows that emotions are possible and they do happen in feedback conversations. We are not just, cool, calm, and collected all the time, like looking professional in a corporate or nonprofit or kind of field environment. Like we're real people and we get frustrated. And so it was a kind of favorite moment in the conversation because he was being really real. About it. And like, that's what I want people to hear. So it was kind of fun. And I was lucky it was in one of the first couple of episodes.
Awesome. Hey, we're halfway through our countdown, and cheers to that. At number 5, we're diving into a moment with Jackie and Katie of Inclusive AF. And in this festive episode, they share the scoop on how they pick their guests and topics. Get ready for some behind-the-scenes magic.
I think we're naturally curious. There's a lot of people who have an interest in the Inclusive AF podcast. I'm always baffled. There's so many people that are like, oh, I'm a fan. I listen. And I get so excited. But then it's really just looking at their background, because I think we intentionally look for ways that people are different, we're curious about what are they bringing to the table? Or I see you live in Iowa. What's that like? Like bringing all these things up help us in developing those topics. Wouldn't you say, Katie?
Absolutely. I think we've been very fortunate that we have, hit the radar of some amazing folks who have reached out to us and said, I want to come on and talk about this topic. And I want to, share what I know about certain things around this, DEI space. And it's been great because, we get the education from each of these individuals, but also, we are curious to hear, what do you want to share and what are you experiencing? And so being able to give a platform to share those stories and share those, that space. We've had folks that are talking about natural hair products. We've had people talking about, how they think about from a spiritual perspective, like all of these different things that it just, I think for us is really cool to personally hear the stories. And so, when Jackie and I are looking at guests, it is like, hey, is this something that we would find interesting? Okay, yeah, then let's have them on and let's talk to them and hear their story and hear what they have to share. And, again, we've been very fortunate in that, we've been able to do that and highlight some great folks.
Wow. How great was that? Wait, speaking of great, at number 4, let's take a look back at the time we had the insightful host and founder, Thomas Fox of Great Big Talk. Here's a look at his take on the power of branding. This episode was full of inspiration. Let's roll the clip.
Whenever I'm working on a branding project or have worked on branding projects, whether for myself or with other people, people tie it into being a graphic design discipline, and it's not. Branding is a social discipline. There's space that a lot of people will do in large corporate settings of trying to find like values and mission and all this stuff and let that bleed into. But it winds up being like personality and all of the stuff that people say about a person, place, thing. There's a name. Mm-hmm. That name has cognitive association. This is kind of a little bit nerdy. This cognitive association
okay. We can be nerdy
with
here.
Individual words. Those words can wind up meaning things because of societal context, but then with time, the things that they're connected to, there winds up being meaning that's derived. Yeah. And when you talk about it in terms of like business, it's always about building trust. So if you have repetitive things that are said in repetitive experiences, mm-hmm. those wind up building trust. Yeah. And then people want to engage with things that they trust.
Yes. Thanks, Thomas. What a treat. Let's turn the spotlight to number 3 on our countdown. We had the pleasure of speaking with Jay Reason of the podcast Diablo's Den. In this episode, Jay emphasizes the importance of consistency in podcasting and not getting too discouraged in the process. Let's hear this great advice.
Consistency is so important when you're doing these shows. Staying on a schedule, especially to like not getting discouraged if the first few weeks or months or however much content you're doing isn't really getting the traction, right? Because what you want to make sure is that like when somebody like me discovers your show, that I can now go back and have weeks, months worth of content, right? So it's kind of really important, especially again for us to just always have stuff out there because you never know. Like one of our biggest episodes has a rapper, Necro, very popular underground hip hop guy, right? So that episode is coming up for people consistently. If we didn't have any content past that or before that, it'd be really hard for somebody to kind of stay with us and stick with it, right? But so for that new fan, now there's going to be, 5 years worth of stuff, and now he'll have time to catch up, and there'll be all these little supplemental things. So again, try not to get too discouraged if in the beginning it's like, oh my God, I'm only getting 20 downloads, 30 downloads. Because again, at least you have 30 people or 40 people who you can kind of begin to train and get consistent with you, right? And then it's like, once you get that one guest or that one show and kind of kicks you into that stratosphere, it's really good to have all that stuff with you, so people can kind of go on that journey with your show and discover the whole kind of beginning and end, the beginning and the middle of stuff.
Are you enjoying this great advice? I know that I am. At number 2, we'll take a look at an eye-opening episode with Carol Costello, former CNN anchor and host of the hit podcast Blind Rage. We sat down with her and she shared her thoughts on having a story to tell. Let's hear about it.
Have a story to tell. Do not just sit down and chatter. Because while that works for some people, it does not work for most people. Yeah. I would say you have to have a good story to tell. And then you have to be organized in the way that you tell it.
And finally, at number 1, as we conclude our countdown, let's dive into the final thoughts from a thought-provoking episode featuring Sean Barnes of the Para-Reality podcast. Sean expresses his heartfelt gratitude for Evergreen Spotlight and shares his enthusiasm for continuing to grow his audience. Let's take a moment and watch this.
I would like to just say that I appreciate the opportunity to appear on this show. I have a relatively small podcast. It's not, there are on Evergreen, there's tons of podcasts that are way bigger than mine. And I know the emphasis is always going to be more towards them and a little bit less towards the smaller podcasts such as mine. And I really appreciate this opportunity to come on and for you to help me promote my little podcast. And maybe this will help it get bigger.
What an incredible year it has been. Thank you for joining me on this countdown of the amazing tips from our Spotlight episodes over the past year. And as we step into the new year, let's carry these valuable lessons and inspiring stories with us. Wishing you all a joyful and prosperous new year. And don't forget to check out the full episodes of Evergreen Spotlight and subscribe for more thrilling content in the upcoming season. I'm Julie Holiday. I'm your host, and here's to a fantastic New Year's ahead. Cheers.